Today we are going to look at exponents, and I'm hoping that this is pretty much a review for you. I want to give a little shout out to my little darlings who helped me create this presentation. Somebody was definitely in a cupcake mood. When we talk about exponents, we're looking at numbers like this. They have what we call a base. So in this case, 2 is the base. And then they have the exponent, which is also called a power. Now, if I was a sixth grader, I would absolutely be taking notes. I would be writing this down. I would be labeling the parts of this number, so that way we make sure that when we're speaking, we're using the same information. When you have something, let's say we have the number 1 that's raised to the second power. The second power is considered, we say, squared. So let's say if you have 2 to the second power, we would say it's 2 squared. Or in this case, it would be 1 squared. So an exponent of 2 means squared. If you have an exponent of 3, we say that's cubed. So if we have the exponent of 1 to the third power, it's also the same as 1 cubed. I use these words interchangeably. Sometimes I'll say 1 squared. Sometimes I'll say 1 to the second power. Sometimes I'll say 1 with an exponent of 2. So you want to make sure that you understand all of those words. Make sure you're writing this down so that way you understand when we're speaking what it is that we're talking about. The base is the number that's being multiplied by itself. The power, or the exponent, tells us how many times we're multiplying that number. So let's look at this example in a couple of different ways. We are going to talk about 3 ways to write a number. We're going to talk about the exponent or exponential form, and that's the number when it has the exponent with it. Makes sense. Factor form is when we take that number and we write it out using all of the factors, all of the numbers that are being multiplied. So 2 to the 5th power is 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. So we see 2 multiplied 5 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that number is simply being multiplied by itself. Standard form is the way in which we see numbers normally. We always are writing them in standard form. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2, and I'm going to multiply it out. So 2 times 2 is 4, 2 times 2 is 4, times another 2. 4 times 4 is 16, and then I'm going to multiply that by 2, so 16 times 2 is 32. And so that's going to be my standard form. I'm going to write a 32 in this little diagram. So that's all we're doing today, is we're taking exponents. We're going to be presented either factor form and we have to write it as an exponent, or we're going to be given exponent form and we need to translate it into factor form and standard form. Make sure you're reading the directions on your work so that way you know what to do. Here's an example. It's not always going to be positive integers or positive whole numbers. Here we have 1/3 to the 4th power, and we are going to write it in factor form as well as in standard form. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 1 to the 3rd power is my base. So that's the number that I know is being multiplied. The exponent of 4 tells me that I am multiplying that 4 times. So it's 1 to the 3rd times 1 to the 3rd times 1 to the 3rd. So this would be my factor form of this number, where I have written it out in all of its factors. Now I'm going to multiply it and find my standard form. Well, remember when we multiply, we always multiply straight across on fractions. So if I multiply 1 4 times, I'm still going to get 1. 3 times 3 is 9. So this 3 times this 3 gives me 9, and this 3 times this 3 gives me 9. So then I can multiply 9 times 9 and I get 81. So this would be 1 over 81 in standard form. It doesn't matter with multiplication the order that you multiply them in. So long as we make sure we multiply everything together, you can group them however you need to. For me, it was easier to do 3 times 3 and 3 times 3 than it was to do 3 times 3 is 9, 9 times 3 is 27, 27 times 3 is 81. Either way, we're going to get the same answer. And then lastly, we have a negative number here. So this is negative 5 times negative 5 times negative 5. So my base is a negative 5, and I'm multiplying it 1, 2, 3 times. So it's going to be negative 5 to the third power as my exponential form. Now I'm going to go ahead and multiply this out. I've got 1, 2, 3 negative signs. So I know that my answer is going to be negative. 5 times 5 is 5, and then I'm going to multiply that by that 5 times 5 is 25. I'm going to multiply that by that last number. 25 times 5 is 125. So I know my answer is negative 125. Now remember, if you have an even number of negative signs, it's going to be positive. If you have an odd number of negative signs, it's going to be negative. Have fun today.